My name is Edith Carter, and I am 77 years old. I wasn't expecting a grand celebration or a red carpet for my evening. All I had looked forward to was a simple dinner at my son Garrett's house, a modest meal, a seat at the table, and a few hours spent with the family I had devoted my life to supporting. I had just finished adjusting the navy blue dress I wore on special occasions. It wasn't fancy, just neat and respectable, the kind of dress Marissa, my daughter-in-law, wouldn't roll her eyes at. I glanced at the clock. It was a little past 6, and dinner was supposed to begin at 7. I felt a small flicker of excitement, imagining the laughter of my grandchildren and the warmth of being surrounded by family. Then my phone buzzed. I reached for my glasses, expecting a reminder from Garrett or perhaps a last-minute question about dessert. Instead, I saw the message. You weren't invited. My wife doesn't want you there. For a moment, I stared at the screen, unable to process the words. 8 words. Not a call, not a conversation, just a text message. My first thought was that it had to be a mistake. Maybe Garrett had sent it to the wrong person, or perhaps his phone had been hacked. But no, it was his number. It was his tone. My hand trembled as I set the phone down on the table. My heart wasn't just breaking, it was unraveling, thread by thread, as memories of Garrett flooded my mind. I saw him as a boy, clinging to my hand on his first day of school. I saw him at 12, crying when his dog passed away. I saw him as a young man, introducing Marissa to me with so much excitement in his eyes. And now I saw him as a grown man, telling me I wasn't welcome in his home. I sat down slowly, the phone still in my hand, staring at the wall in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I just sat there, feeling the weight of those 8 words settle over me like a heavy blanket. That was the moment something inside me shifted. After all the years of giving, of showing up, of being there for people who made it clear they didn't want me, I realized something had to change. The house was quiet, too quiet, and in that silence, I began to see the truth I had been avoiding for years. The house was still quiet, the kind of silence that felt heavy, pressing down on me as I sat at the kitchen table. My name is Edith Carter, and I had just been uninvited from my son's home, the home I had helped him build, the family I had spent decades supporting. The words from Garrett's text still echoed in my mind. You weren't invited. My wife doesn't want you there. I hadn't cried, not yet. Instead, I sat there, staring at the phone, replaying the message over and over as if reading it enough times would somehow change its meaning. But it didn't. It was clear, cold, and final. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through memories and questions I didn't want to face. How had it come to this? How had I become someone so easily dismissed, so invisible to the people I had given everything to? I thought of James, my late husband, and the way he used to hold my hand when life felt overwhelming. His voice echoed in my mind, steady and calm. Edith, love them, but don't let them walk on you. I had always brushed off those words, thinking they didn't apply to me. After all, wasn't it a mother's job to give, to sacrifice, to put her family first? But now, sitting in the dark, I realized that somewhere along the way, I had let my love become a currency, something to be spent and taken for granted. By sunrise, I knew what I had to do. I made myself a strong cup of tea, sat back at the kitchen table, and pulled out the drawer of my old secretary desk. Inside was a stack of neatly labeled folders, each one a testament to the years of financial support I had provided to Garrett and his family. I opened the thickest folder, the one labeled Garrett, and began flipping through its contents. There were tuition receipts from when Marissa went back to school, bank transfers for roof repairs, and even a $20,000 check I had written to help Garrett launch a business that folded within a year. Each piece of paper told a story, not of generosity, but of expectation. My wallet had been their safety net, my name the invisible ink on every corner of their lives. I paused when I came across the brochure for their townhouse, the one overlooking the river. I had paid $120,000 toward the down payment. Garrett had called me 6 months ago, full of excitement, saying, Mom, you'll have your own corner here. It'll be a place for the whole family. But that corner, apparently, didn't come with a seat at the dinner table. I leaned back in my chair, whispering the question I had been too afraid to ask for years. Was this love, or just a transaction? The answer came not in words, but in a quiet, resolute feeling that settled over me. I had spent a lifetime giving, and they had spent a lifetime taking. It wasn't their fault entirely, I had allowed it. But now I was done. I picked up the phone and called the bank. "Good morning, Fayetteville Community Bank. How may I help you?" "My name is Edith Carter," I said, my voice steady. "I need to suspend all automatic payments from my accounts immediately." There was a pause on the other end. "All payments, ma'am?" "Yes," I replied, "every single one. And I also need to revoke the power of attorney granted to my son, Garrett Carter." The woman on the other end hesitated, then began typing. "That's a significant change, Mrs. Carter. We'll need your signature for the full process, but I can begin the suspension now." "That's what I want," I said firmly. "Start today." When she confirmed that all 174 automatic payments had been blocked, I hung up the phone and exhaled deeply. I hadn't realized how heavy it all had been. The years of small compromises, the quiet dismissals, the holidays spent alone while still footing the bills. That morning, I didn't just cancel payments. I reclaimed space in my own life. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, like the first breath after holding it for too long. My name is Edith Carter, and that morning I chose myself. The house was still quiet when the doorbell rang, its sharp chime cutting through the stillness like a blade. My name is Edith Carter, and I had just taken the first real step toward reclaiming my life. I had canceled every automatic payment, revoked Garrett's power of attorney, and for the first time in decades, drawn a boundary. But boundaries, I was learning, don't come without consequences. I opened the door to find Garrett standing there, his face pale and drawn, his shirt wrinkled as though he had thrown it on in a hurry. He didn't wait for an invitation. He walked right in, his movements sharp and impatient, the way they always were when he wanted something. "Mom," he began, his voice tight. "What's going on?" The mortgage bounced. Marissa's car payment didn't go through. The bank called about the suspended authorizations. "Did you cancel everything?" I closed the door behind him and turned to face him, my hands steady at my sides. "Yes," I said simply. "I did." "All of it?" he asked, his voice rising in disbelief. "All 174 transactions?" I nodded. "All of it." He sank into the living room chair, his shoulders slumping as though the weight of the world had just been dropped on him. "Why?" he asked, his voice quieter now, almost pleading. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just looked at him and said, "You uninvited me from your house, Garrett. The house I helped pay for. You sent me a message saying your wife didn't want me there, and you didn't even try to stop her." "That was a mistake," he stammered, his hands gripping the armrests of a chair. "Marissa was upset. I didn't mean it." "You didn't mean to say it," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "Or you didn't mean for there to be consequences." He looked away, his jaw tightening. I walked to the kitchen and poured 2 cups of tea, placing one in front of him. He didn't touch it. "We have bills, Mom," he said finally, his voice breaking. "Loans. Toby's tuition. The house. You've always helped us." "I did," I agreed, sitting across from him. But that help became expected. And then it became invisible. Garrett opened his mouth to respond, but I raised my hand. "Tell me one thing you've done for me, Garrett," I said, my voice soft but steady. "One thing you did not because you had to, but because you wanted to. One thing that didn't involve you needing something from me." He sat in silence, his eyes fixed on the floor. And in that silence, I found my answer. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of years of unspoken truths finally lifting. "I love you, Garrett," I said, my voice gentle. "But love isn't a blank check. It's not something you take for granted. It's something you show, every day with your actions." He looked up at me then, his eyes glassy. "What do you want me to do, Mom? Apologize? Beg?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "I want you to grow up. I want you to stop confusing love with dependence. And I want you to take responsibility for your own life." The words landed like thunder, but I didn't flinch. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of the silence that followed. Garrett stood slowly, his movements heavy, as though he were carrying the weight of my words on his shoulders. "I'll figure it out," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know you will," I replied, standing to walk him to the door. "And when you do, I'll be here. Not as your safety net, but as your mother." He nodded, his hand lingering on the doorknob for a moment before he stepped outside. I closed the door behind him and leaned against it, exhaling deeply. My name is Edith Carter, and today I chose to let my son face the consequences of his own choices. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. For him. And for me. The house felt heavier after Garrett left, as though his presence had left behind an invisible weight. My name is Edith Carter, and I had just told my son that I would no longer be his safety net. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was necessary. For the first time in years, I had drawn a line, and I wasn't going to step back over it. I thought I might feel relief, but instead, I felt a strange mix of emotions: sadness, guilt, and a flicker of something unfamiliar, pride. I was still sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched cup of tea I had poured for Garrett, when the doorbell rang again. My heart sank. I wasn't ready for another confrontation, but I stood and opened the door anyway. This time, it was Toby, my grandson. He looked disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, and his hair sticking up as though he had run his hands through it one too many times. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, dropping onto the couch with a heavy sigh. "Grandma," he began, his voice shaky, "I need help." I sat down across from him, folding my hands in my lap. "What kind of help, Toby?" "My credit card's been frozen," he said, rubbing his hands together nervously. "I can't pay my rent. My car's overdue. I'm in trouble." I nodded slowly, keeping my voice calm. "How much do you owe?" He hesitated, avoiding my eyes. "About $7,000. "What did you spend it on?" I asked, my tone steady but firm. He shrugged, still not meeting my gaze. "Some stuff. A new phone. A trip with friends. A few parties." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. Toby was 23 years old, working full-time at an insurance company, and yet here he was, sitting in my living room, asking for a bailout. "You've been working for 2 years now, right?" "Yeah," he mumbled. "So why haven't you learned to manage your money?" He looked like a child being scolded, not a grown man. "I guess I always thought I could ask Mom and Dad. Or you." "That's the problem," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You've all gotten used to thinking I'd always be here to fix things. But I'm not your backup plan, Toby. I'm not your bank." His eyes widened, and for a moment, he looked genuinely lost. "Grandma, please," he said, leaning forward. "Just this once. I swear I'll pay you back." "No," I said firmly but not unkindly. "But I will offer you something else." He blinked, confused. "Like what?" "My lawyer, Mr. Whitaker, is looking for a part-time assistant," I said. "Filing, answering phones. It won't solve everything, but it's honest work." "You do that for me?" he asked, his voice small. "I love you, Toby," I said, leaning forward. "But I'm done enabling you. My love is no longer measured in money." He sat quietly, processing my words. For the first time, I didn't give in. And for the first time, he heard the word, no, not out of anger, but out of love. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was Rebecca, my granddaughter. She stood on the porch with a bag of groceries in her arms and a soft smile on her face. "Grandma," she said as I let her in, "I saw Dad earlier. He looked lost. Mom's furious. Toby's sulking. The house is chaos." I didn't respond right away. We unpacked the groceries together, moving in a quiet rhythm that felt comforting. She chopped vegetables while I boiled pasta, and for the first time in days, the house felt warm again. After a while, she asked quietly, "Are you okay?" I looked at her, truly looked at her. Rebecca had always been different, quieter, more thoughtful. She never asked for much. She called on my birthday. She visited without a reason. She hugged me just a little longer. "I'm okay," I said, and for the first time in a very long time, I meant it. "I think I'm actually okay." She smiled, her eyes soft. "Good, because I think you're doing the right thing." I raised an eyebrow. "You do?" She nodded. "I've seen how they use you. Especially Mom. She's always dressed in the best, drives the best, and somehow it's always you footing the bill." Her words startled me, not because they weren't true, but because they came from someone so young. "You've taken care of everyone for so long," Rebecca added. It's time someone took care of you. We sat down for dinner, just the two of us. No tension, no manipulation, just a simple meal and honest conversation. Before she left, she hugged me tight. I'll always be here for you, Grandma, she whispered. Not for your money. For you. I kissed her cheek, my heart full. That's all I ever wanted. In a house that had echoed with demands and expectations, Rebecca's presence was the one thing that felt real. It reminded me what family should feel like. Safe, sincere, and free. My name is Edith Carter, and that night, I realized I wasn't alone. I had Rebecca, and I had myself. The days after Rebecca's visit were quiet, but not in the way they had been before. This time, the silence didn't feel heavy or suffocating. It felt like space to breathe, to think, to simply be. My name is Edith Carter, and for the first time in decades, I was learning what it meant to live for myself. But peace, I was quickly discovering, doesn't come without resistance. It started with a phone call from Garrett. His voice was tight, rehearsed, as though he had practiced what he was going to say. Mom, he began, we need to talk. As a family. I could hear Marissa in the background, her voice sharp and insistent, though I couldn't make out the words. Tomorrow at 2, I said, cutting him off before he could launch into whatever speech he had prepared. My house. No surprises. But, of course, there were surprises. At exactly 2 o'clock, Garrett arrived first. He looked exhausted, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes puffy. Mom, he said, stepping inside. I wanted to talk to you before everyone else arrived. Everyone else? I asked, my voice calm but firm. He hesitated, glancing toward the driveway. Marissa, she invited a few people. Her parents, her sister. They're concerned. I stepped to the window and froze. 3 cars had just pulled into my driveway. Out stepped Marissa, dressed to the nines as always, followed by her parents, her siblings, and even a couple of their friends. It wasn't a family meeting. It was an ambush. I turned back to Garrett, my expression unreadable. You brought an audience. She thinks, he started, but I held up my hand. When the doorbell rang, I opened it slowly. Marissa stood there, flanked by her delegation, her smile wide and artificial. Good afternoon, Edith, she said loudly, projecting her voice as though she were addressing a courtroom. We're here to discuss the situation as a family. This is my home, I said quietly, my voice steady. Not a courtroom, not a boardroom, just my home. And I didn't invite any of them. Marissa blinked, clearly not expecting pushback. Edith, this affects all of us. My parents' retirement plans, Garrett's brother's situation, even Toby's future. Marissa, I interrupted, my tone sharp enough to cut through her practiced speech. Garrett, Toby, and Rebecca may come in. The rest can wait outside. Or leave. Her smile faltered, and for a moment, I saw the cracks in her carefully constructed facade. She turned to her family, her voice tight. Please wait in the cars. We won't be long. Reluctantly, they retreated, their expressions a mix of confusion and irritation. Once inside, I faced Garrett, Marissa, Toby, and Rebecca. I stood tall, my hand steady, my voice calm. So, I said, who wants to tell me what this circus is really about? Marissa launched into a speech, her words rehearsed and polished. Your financial decision affects all of us, she began. The mortgage, the car payments, Toby's tuition, these are things we've come to rely on. You've always been there for us, Edith. We just didn't think you'd ever stop. I listened, arms crossed, saying nothing. When she finally paused for breath, I looked at her and asked, and when did I become responsible for all of that? No one answered. The room was heavy with silence, the kind that forces people to confront truths they'd rather avoid. Garrett finally spoke, his voice low. Mom, we've come to rely on your help. You've always been there. We didn't think you'd ever stop. I nodded slowly, my expression unreadable. Exactly, I said. You didn't think. You just took. I turned to Toby. How many times have you visited me just because you wanted to? Not because you needed money. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding my gaze. And Marissa, I said, facing her. Tell me one thing, one single thing, you've done for me without expectation. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, her carefully constructed arguments crumbling under the weight of my words. "You see," I continued, my voice soft but firm, "what hurts isn't just the money. It's the erasure. The way I disappeared from your hearts the moment I stopped paying." Marissa's mask slipped, her voice hardening. "This is manipulation," she snapped. "You're trying to guilt us." "No," I said, meeting her gaze. "I'm telling you the truth. For once." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice sharp. "When you're alone, when no one's there, you'll regret pushing us away." I didn't flinch. "Family isn't just a word we use when we want something," I said quietly. "It's a choice we make every day with our actions, not our invoices." Garrett looked up, his eyes glassy. "What do you want us to do, Mom? Apologize? Beg?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "I want you to grow up. I want you to stop confusing love with dependence. And I want you to leave." The words were calm, but they landed like thunder. Toby stood without protest. Marissa muttered something under her breath as she stormed out. Garrett lingered, unsure. "I'll be here," I told him, "if you ever want to talk. Really talk. Not about money, but about us." He nodded slowly and followed the others out the door. Only Rebecca stayed behind, her arms wrapping around me in a tight hug. "I'm proud of you, Grandma," she whispered. I didn't reply. I just held her close, because for the first time in a long time, I had nothing to prove and nothing to give but the truth. "My name is Edith Carter, and today I chose to stand my ground." The house was quiet again after they left, but this time the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. "My name is Edith Carter, and today I stood my ground." I had faced my son, my daughter-in-law, and the weight of their expectations, and I had told them the truth. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of their disappointment or their anger. I wasn't afraid of being alone. The days that followed were strange, like stepping into a new world where the air felt lighter and the ground steadier beneath my feet. I didn't hear from Garrett or Marissa, and I didn't expect to. I imagined their house was in chaos, with bills piling up and arguments filling the space where my money used to be. But I didn't feel guilty. Not anymore. Instead, I began to reclaim the parts of my life I had long ignored. I started with the small things, making myself a proper breakfast in the morning, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, and reading the books I had always meant to get to but never had the time for. I even signed up for an art class at the community center, something I had always wanted to do but had never dared prioritize. Rebecca visited often, her presence a quiet comfort in the midst of all the change. She never asked for anything. She just came to talk, to laugh, to share her world with me. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch, she told me about her plans to move into her own apartment. "It's small," she said, "but it's mine, and I want you to come see it when it's ready. I'm making a room just for you, Grandma. Always." Her words brought tears to my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude, of relief, of love. "That's all I ever wanted," I told her, my voice soft. 6 months passed, and in that time, I didn't hear much from Garrett or Marissa. The calls dwindled after a few half-hearted attempts, some apologetic, some demanding. Eventually, they stopped altogether. Rebecca told me they had sold the townhouse and moved to a smaller apartment. Marissa had taken on extra work, and Garrett, to my surprise, had finally learned how to manage a budget. Toby, too, had changed. He had taken the job with Mr. Whitaker, my lawyer, and though he still had a lot to learn, he was starting to find his footing. I ran into him once at the grocery store. He looked tired but different, less entitled, more grounded. We exchanged a quiet hello, and that was enough. As for me, I decided it was time to do something I had put off for far too long. James and I had always dreamed of going to Italy, but life had gotten in the way. There was always something more important, someone else who needed me. But now, there was nothing holding me back. Rebecca insisted I go. "Do it for you, Grandma," she said. "For once, just for you." And so I did. Now I sit on a terrace in Tuscany, watching the sun dip below the rolling vineyards. The sky is painted in shades of gold and violet, and the air is warm and fragrant with the scent of lavender. My oldest friend, Laureen, sits beside me, scribbling notes in her travel journal. She looks up and smiles. "You look lighter," she says. "I am," I reply, and I mean it. Because I finally laid down the weight of other people's expectations. I finally stopped measuring my worth by what I could give and started living for myself. It's not just the absence of noise that feels like peace, it's the presence of self. That evening, as twilight settles over the Tuscan hills, my phone buzzes. Garrett's name lights up the screen. 6 months ago, I would have answered before the second ring, eager, hopeful, already rehearsing ways to fix whatever was wrong. But now, I simply look at the screen and let it fade to black. I don't need to hear another promise. I don't need to be pulled back into a cycle I've finally stepped out of. Instead, I pick up my wine glass, raise it to the horizon, and whisper to me. To the version of me that had always come last. The version that stayed silent at dinner tables where I was unwelcome. The version that paid bills with shaking hands and called it love. She's gone now. In her place stands a woman who has learned that freedom doesn't come from letting go of people. It comes from letting go of permission. I don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing peace. I don't owe anyone my savings, my time, or my seat at a table I was never truly welcome to. What I do owe at this stage in life is honesty with myself. And for the first time, I'm giving myself exactly that. My name is Edith Carter, and I am finally free. The Tuscan sun had long set, leaving the sky a deep indigo, dotted with stars that seemed brighter than I had ever seen before. My name is Edith Carter, and tonight I feel whole. Sitting on the terrace, the cool evening breeze brushing against my skin, I let myself reflect on the journey that brought me here. It wasn't an easy one, but it was necessary. Earlier, as I raised my glass to the horizon and whispered, to me, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just a toast, it was a declaration. A promise to the version of myself I had neglected for so long. The version that had always come last, that had been silenced by the weight of others' needs and expectations. She was gone now, and in her place stood a woman who had finally learned to choose herself. My phone buzzed again, pulling me from my thoughts. This time it wasn't Garrett. It was Rebecca. She had sent me a photo of her new apartment. A cozy, sunlit space with a small balcony and a bookshelf already filled with her favorite novels. Beneath the photo was a simple message. Grandma, I can't wait for you to visit. I made you a room. Just yours. Always. I smiled, my heart swelling with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Rebecca had always been different. She had seen me, truly seen me, not as a source of money or a solution to problems, but as a person. Her message reminded me that love, real love, doesn't come with strings attached. It's not measured in transactions or obligations. It's measured in moments like this, a room made just for me, a space where I am welcome simply for being who I am. As I sat there, the sounds of laughter and music drifting up from the village below, I thought about Garrett, Marissa, and Toby. I wondered if they had learned anything from the boundaries I had set. I hoped they had, but even if they hadn't, I knew I had done the right thing. For them. And for me. The legacy I leave behind won't be the money I gave, or the house I helped build. It will be the truth I finally spoke and the boundaries I was brave enough to draw. It will be the lessons Rebecca carries forward, the strength she has already shown in creating a life of her own. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes and letting the sounds of Tuscany wash over me. For the first time in decades, I wasn't anyone's emergency contact, anyone's financial plan, or anyone's silent sponsor. I was just Edith, and that was enough. Tomorrow, I'll explore the vineyards and taste wines I can't pronounce. I'll laugh with Laureen and scribble notes in my own journal. I'll live. Not for anyone else, but for me. My name is Edith Carter, and I have finally found peace.